My parents body shamed me after I reached 370 pounds. My sister smirked and said, "I'm ashamed to be seen with you in public." My response made her face go pale. I, 32M, stood in front of the mirror that Sunday afternoon, avoiding my own reflection like I had for the past 8 months. At 370 pounds, I'd become someone I didn't recognize. The man staring back at me wore shame like a second skin, and I knew my family could smell it on me from a mile away. The intervention happened during what was supposed to be a casual family dinner. My parents had invited me over, and I should have known something was off when my sister showed up unannounced. She lived 2 hours away and rarely made the trip without weeks of planning. They waited until I'd finished my plate, because of course they did, before my mother cleared her throat in that particular way that meant a lecture was coming. She started gently, talking about health concerns and doctor visits, but the mask slipped quickly. My father jumped in with statistics about heart disease and diabetes, rattling off numbers like he was presenting a quarterly report. Then my sister leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the table, and said she was ashamed to be seen with me in public. The words came out casual, almost bored, like she was commenting on the weather. She actually smirked when she said it. My mother nodded along, adding that I'd let myself go and become an embarrassment to the family. My father mentioned an upcoming family reunion and suggested I might want to skip it to avoid uncomfortable questions. The subtext was clear. They didn't want me there. I sat there absorbing their words, feeling each one land like a physical blow. But underneath the shame, something else stirred. Anger, maybe. Or just exhaustion from years of being their punching bag. I looked at my sister's smug face, at my parents' disappointed expressions, and something inside me snapped into place. I told them I appreciated their concern and would take their advice to heart. The response clearly surprised them. They'd expected me to argue or break down. My sister's smirk widened. She probably thought she'd finally broken me. I left that dinner with my head up and my jaw clenched. During the drive home, I made a decision that would change everything. But it wasn't the decision they expected. The next morning, I called my boss and requested a 6-month leave of absence. I'd been working as a software engineer for the same company for 9 years, had accumulated months of unused vacation time, and had enough savings to support myself. My boss, surprised but supportive, approved it within 2 days. Then I disappeared. I didn't tell my family where I was going. I simply stopped answering their calls and texts. My mother left increasingly frantic voicemails. My father sent stern messages demanding I contact them immediately. My sister oscillated between fake concern and irritation that I was being dramatic. I ignored them all. I'd rented a small house 3 states away in a quiet mountain town where nobody knew me. The place was basic but had everything I needed: a full kitchen, a home gym set up in the garage, and most importantly, no judgmental family members within 100 miles. The first month was brutal. I hired a personal trainer named Mike, a former Marine who didn't believe in coddling. He showed up at 6 every morning and put me through workouts that left me gasping. I wanted to quit approximately 700 times. My body screamed. My mind invented creative excuses. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered my sister's smirk and my parents' disappointed faces. I also hired a nutritionist who taught me that food wasn't my enemy. My relationship with it was. She helped me understand the emotional eating that had gotten me here, the way I'd used food to cope with stress and loneliness. We worked through meal plans that actually satisfied me while creating the calorie deficit I needed. The weight started coming off. Slowly at first, then more noticeably. I tracked everything obsessively: calories, steps, measurements, progress photos. Numbers became my motivation. Back home, my family's messages evolved. My mother's voicemails turned accusatory, claiming I was being selfish and immature. My father threatened to file a missing persons report until I sent a single text confirming I was alive and needed space. My sister posted vague social media updates about family members who abandon you when things get tough, fishing for sympathy from friends who had no idea what she was talking about. 3 months in, I'd lost 70 pounds. I barely recognized myself in the mirror, but this time in a good way. My face had definition again. I could see my collarbones. Clothes I hadn't worn in years were starting to fit. Mike increased the intensity of our workouts. We added weight training to build muscle as the fat came off. I discovered I actually enjoyed pushing my body, testing my limits, proving to myself I was stronger than I thought. For months in, Another 60 pounds gone. I was down to 240 pounds and felt like a different person. Not just physically, mentally, I'd changed too. The solitude had given me time to think about my life, my choices, my family dynamics. I realized how much of myself I'd lost trying to please people who would never be satisfied. My parents had always been critical. Growing up, nothing I did was quite good enough. My sister, their golden child, could do no wrong while I constantly fell short. The weight had just given them a new avenue for their disappointment. I started therapy via video calls with a counselor who specialized in family dynamics. She helped me understand that their treatment of me wasn't about my weight. It was about control and their own insecurities. My weight had just been a convenient target. 5 months in, I'd hit 210 pounds. The transformation was remarkable. I'd gone from morbidly obese to athletic. I had muscle definition, a strong jawline, clear skin from proper nutrition. I barely recognized myself. I also barely recognized my priorities. I'd started working remotely part-time, taking on freelance projects that actually excited me. I'd made friends in the small town, people who knew me as I was now, not as I'd been. People who valued me for my personality, my humor, my intelligence. The family reunion was scheduled for early November, exactly 6 months after my disappearance. I kept track of the date, circled it mentally as my deadline. My parents had continued their sporadic messages, though my sister had gone quiet after I'd blocked her on social media. 2 weeks before the reunion, I finally responded to my mother's latest voicemail. I told her I'd be attending after all and to save me a seat. She sounded relieved and angry in equal measure, demanding to know where I'd been and what I'd been doing. I kept my answers vague and told her she'd see me at the reunion. Update 1. The family reunion was held at my uncle's lake house, the same venue they'd used for years. I arrived exactly on time, parked my car at the end of the long driveway, and took a moment to steady myself. The old me would have been terrified. The new me was calm and ready. I walked up to the house wearing clothes that actually fit, dark jeans and a fitted button-down that showed off the physique I'd worked so hard to build. I'd gotten a haircut, grown a beard that hid the last traces of double chin. I looked good and I knew it. My cousin answered the door and literally didn't recognize me. She stared for a solid 5 seconds before her eyes went wide and she actually gasped. She called out that I'd arrived, and I heard the party noise dim as people turned to look. I walked into the living room where most of the family had gathered. The reactions were priceless. My aunt dropped her wine glass. My uncle's jaw went slack. Various cousins and extended family members did double takes and started whispering. Then I saw them. My parents stood near the fireplace, frozen in shock. My mother's hand had gone to her mouth. My father looked like he'd seen a ghost. And my sister, she was sitting on the couch, mid-conversation with a cousin, when she looked up and saw me. The blood drained from her face. Her expression cycled through confusion, recognition, shock, and something that looked like fear. Her smirk was nowhere to be found. I walked over to them with confident strides that the old me never had. My mother recovered first, rushing over with tears in her eyes, saying she'd been so worried, and I looked amazing. My father followed, trying to hug me while peppering me with questions about where I'd been. I kept my responses polite but distant. I told them I'd taken some time to focus on my health like they'd suggested. I thanked them for their concern at that dinner 6 months ago, said it had really motivated me to make changes. My sister finally stood up and approached. She tried to hug me, but I stepped back, keeping physical distance. She asked where I'd been and why I'd cut everyone off. Her voice had a sharp edge despite the sweet tone she was trying for. I looked at her directly and told her I'd needed to get away from negative influences while I worked on myself. I said sometimes the people closest to us can be the most toxic, even when they think they're helping. Her face went pale again. She understood exactly what I meant. The reunion continued, but I was the center of attention. Everyone wanted to know my secret, how I'd lost the weight, what program I'd followed. I gave vague answers about discipline and proper nutrition, but mostly I deflected. I wasn't there to be their inspiration or their cautionary tale. I watched my family throughout the evening. My parents kept hovering, trying to reclaim some connection they thought still existed. My sister stayed on the opposite side of the room, her earlier smugness replaced with something that looked like resentment. Near the end of the night, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. She said she was proud of me and that she'd always just wanted what was best for me. She tried to downplay that dinner, claiming they'd been coming from a place of love. I interrupted her and said that love doesn't humiliate. Love doesn't shame. Love doesn't make someone feel worthless for having a struggle. I told her that dinner had been cruel, and while it had motivated me to change, it had also motivated me to reevaluate who deserved space in my life. She looked stunned. She'd probably expected me to be grateful, to thank them for the tough love that had pushed me to lose weight. Instead, I was holding them accountable. My father joined us and tried to change the subject, asking when I'd be moving back home and returning to my old life. I told him I wasn't. I'd found a life I actually enjoyed, away from constant criticism and judgment. I said I'd be staying in my new town and would visit occasionally, but things would be different now. The evening ended awkwardly. As people left, my sister finally approached me directly. She asked if we could talk privately. I agreed, and we walked out to the dock by the lake. She started with an apology that felt rehearsed. She said she hadn't meant what she'd said at that dinner, that she'd just been frustrated and concerned. She claimed she'd never actually been ashamed of me. I let her finish, then asked her if she remembered all the other times she'd made comments about my weight over the years. The jokes at family gatherings. The unsolicited advice. The way she'd exclude me from activities because she didn't want her friends to meet her fat brother. She went quiet. I told her that dinner hadn't been an isolated incident. It had been the culmination of years of small cruelties. I said I'd lost the weight for myself, not for her or our parents, and that I'd also lost the need for their approval. She tried to argue, saying family was family and we needed to stick together. I laughed and said family should build you up, not tear you down. I told her she'd made her feelings clear that night, and I'd finally listened. Her face went pale again, but this time tears filled her eyes. She asked if I was cutting them out of my life completely. I told her no, but that boundaries would exist now. I wouldn't tolerate disrespect or criticism. I wouldn't accept being anyone's punching bag or project. If they could respect that, we could have a relationship. If not, I'd be perfectly fine alone. She nodded but didn't say anything else. We walked back to the house in silence. Update 2. The weeks after the reunion were telling. My mother called constantly, oscillating between pride in my transformation and hurt that I was maintaining distance. My father sent occasional texts that were clearly attempts to reassert his authority, reminding me about career opportunities back home and family obligations I was neglecting. My sister went silent for 2 weeks, then sent a long text message at 2 in the morning. She admitted she'd always been jealous of me. Despite being the golden child, she'd envied my intelligence, my career success, my ability to be comfortable with myself before the weight gain. She said making me feel bad about my weight had been her way of feeling superior in at least one area. The honesty surprised me. I responded acknowledging her message, but made it clear that understanding her motivations didn't excuse her behavior. I told her I appreciated the self-reflection, but that rebuilding trust would take time and consistent change behavior. She replied asking if we could start fresh. I said no, we couldn't erase the past, but we could build something different if she was willing to put in the work. Meanwhile, my life in the mountain town continued to flourish. I'd been promoted at work, taking on a senior role that let me work remotely permanently. I'd started dating someone I'd met at the gym, a physical therapist who appreciated my dedication and understood the work that went into major life changes. I joined a hiking group and discovered I loved pushing my body up mountain trails. I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. 3 months after the reunion, my parents drove out to visit unannounced. I'd mentioned my address in passing during a phone call, and they'd taken it as an invitation. I opened my door to find them standing on my porch with luggage, planning to stay for a few days. I let them in, but made it clear they should have asked first. They looked around my small house, and I could see my mother's judgment in every glance. The modest furniture, the lack of decoration, the home gym equipment taking up my garage. This wasn't the life they'd envisioned for me. We sat down for coffee, and my father immediately started in about moving back home. He'd found job listings at companies near them, higher-paying positions that would put me back in their orbit. My mother added that I'd made my point and proved I could lose weight, but now it was time to come back to reality. I let them finish, then asked them if they'd heard anything I'd said at the reunion. They looked confused. I repeated that I wasn't coming back because I was happy here. This was my reality now, a reality I'd built for myself without their input or approval. My father got frustrated and said I was being stubborn and throwing away opportunities. My mother tried a different approach, guilt-tripping about missing me and wanting me closer. Neither approach worked. I told them they were welcome to visit occasionally if they called ahead, but that my decision was final. I'd found a life that made me feel valued and respected, and I wasn't giving that up to return to a situation where I'd always fall short of their expectations. They left the next morning, disappointment written all over their faces. My sister's visits were different. She started driving out once a month, always calling ahead, always respecting my boundaries. We'd go for hikes or grab coffee, and slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding something that resembled a healthy sibling relationship. She'd started therapy herself, working through the family dynamics that had shaped her behavior. She apologized multiple times, and each apology felt more genuine than the last. I could see her actively trying to change, catching herself when she fell into old patterns of judgment or criticism. I told her I appreciated the effort and that I could see the work she was putting in. I also told her that some damage takes years to repair, and I needed her to be patient with my guardedness. She agreed and kept showing up, kept putting in the work. 6 months after the reunion, I'd maintained my weight at 205 pounds. I'd built muscle and strength I'd never had before. More importantly, I'd built a life I loved with people who respected me. My parents still called regularly, still tried to convince me to move back, still couldn't quite accept that I'd chosen a different path. I'd made peace with their disappointment. It wasn't my job to live the life they wanted for me. My sister had become someone I could actually talk to. We'd never be as close as siblings who grew up supporting each other, but we'd found a new dynamic that worked. She'd even apologized to me in front of our parents during a holiday gathering, acknowledging her past behavior and taking accountability. The look on our parents' faces had been priceless, confusion mixed with discomfort. They didn't know how to handle their children having honest conversations about family dysfunction. Looking back at that dinner where everything changed, I felt an odd gratitude. My family's cruelty had been the catalyst I needed to completely rebuild my life. They'd wanted me to lose weight and stop being an embarrassment. Instead, I'd lost my dependence on their approval and stopped being someone who tolerated disrespect. My sister's smirk that night had haunted me for months. But now, when I thought about it, I just felt indifferent. She'd been a different person then, smaller, meaner, trapped in her own insecurities. I'd been a different person too, broken, ashamed, desperate for acceptance. We'd both changed. The difference was I'd changed into someone I actually liked. I still maintained my weight loss routine, not because I was afraid of gaining the weight back, but because I'd fallen in love with being strong and capable. I'd proven to myself that I could completely transform my life when I committed to it. The best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't making them regret their words. It was building a life so fulfilling that their opinions became irrelevant. It was becoming so secure in myself that their approval or disapproval carried no weight. My family had wanted me to change my body. Instead, I'd changed everything. My location, my priorities, my boundaries, my entire life. And I'd done it completely on my own terms. That was the response that really made their faces go pale. Not my transformation, but my independence from their judgment. If you like this story, please like this video and subscribe us for more such real-life-based stories. Thanks in advance.